Hello, hello. Welcome back again. This time it's going to be a little bit different. Rather than reviewing a movie or a book, I just want to kind of like very briefly talk about a recent video that I saw. This video was from the SuperCarlinBrothers. They are, it's actually a fantastic channel. I'm going to link the video down in the description, but they really, they talk about theories on Harry Potter, on the Pixar movies, Disney movies. I mean, if you're interested in that type of fun theorizing and all that, I would recommend watching them. They're very entertaining, and they also have a few other channels. So I believe they have a gaming channel where they do some playthroughs, including I believe it's like they've done playthroughs on Pokemon games, and so that's also fun. At any rate, the particular video that I want to talk about is whether if Voldemort was born evil or not. And to just give the cliff notes, Ben does conclude that yes, Voldemort was essentially born evil, and that's why he was as powerful as he was in the books and the films. He was kind of like a step beyond what would be, for example, a Grindelwald or any other evil wizard that has ever existed. Now, I'm not going to go into the details because I would recommend watching the video for that. But at any rate, I did want to kind of touch on that point on Voldemort being born evil. And evil is very much a very qualitative term. In other words, who gets to decide what's good and what's evil? If we look at some of Voldemort's kind of characteristics, we do, and he does mention about nature versus nurture. Ben, he does mention it, but in essence, what are Voldemort's characteristics? I mean, he is very determined. He's very patient. He is very motivated and has a drive, and he is very resilient. Because if you look at his history, he, from being in an orphanage, he became all of a sudden this prodigy that everybody loved in Hogwarts during his time in school. He also remained relevant after he left, although not many people realized it was him. And he almost created a crisis involving the whole wizarding world, not just in Britain. However, again, let's go over. He was very resilient, high drive, very cunning, and very patient. All those characteristics, if you think about them, if you have to be patient about making strategies, you have to be cunning to come up with the strategies of getting your goal. Uh, you have to be resilient enough that you have to be adaptable to whatever changes will come. So, what other aspects can you apply that to? Well, let's say an army or like military situation. Of course, a general, a commander, they have to look very calmly at a situation, and they have to know, well, how do we proceed in order to win a battle, win a war. He could have also been a prime minister, for example, knowing how to lead his people, knowing how to kind of adapt to any certain situations between different countries, and that way find a resolution. Notice military leadership, are those necessarily evil? Well, let me jump over to this. What is also very militaristic and very much in a leadership position in the Wizarding world? Ah, that would be the Ministry of Magic, which in the books and in the films, We only get to look at the one in the United Kingdom. However, what do we notice? Cornelius Fudge. We have Dolores Umbridge. I could name a few more, but you get the picture. What do they do? Well, in the case of Dolores Umbridge, she was very loyal to the Ministry, very loyal to Fudge. Not only that, she also had a very, you could say like a very, I don't want to say ethnocentric necessarily, but she did have a very skewed view on who, on the hierarchy of the different magical creatures. That is to say that in her view, witches and wizards are above all else. Anything that doesn't have magic, like any normal humans with no magic, any creatures like house elves, werewolves, centaurs, mer people, like all those are not equal to a human. Therefore they don't have equal rights. Is that good? Is that bad? I mean, you would think a Ministry of Magic should be good, right? Because they're in a position of power. However, what was Dolores Umbridge doing? Well, she was resilient because in her position in Hogwarts, if you remember the sixth film or the sixth book, she was when when with all the existing conflicts between that, well, not conflicts, but being how the situation was between the teachers and students not accepting her. What did she do? Implementing school laws, number blah blah blah, school decrees, and she would say, okay, nobody can be in groups greater than 3. Nobody can join an organization unless I approve of it. Nobody can do this or that, or we have this new group that I command. That type of thing. So she was resilient. She had a plan. She was cunning to come up with these decrees to kind of limit how much Harry could potentially do against her. But also, she was patient. Well, kind of. That doesn't that sound a little bit familiar to the whole Voldemort situation that I just covered? It kind of does, right? But Dolores Umbridge wasn't evil, was she? So what I'm trying to say is that, and I'm not even going to cover Cornelius Fudge because Cornelius Fudge was basically in denial the whole time. But we do have this situation where if Voldemort was born evil, that means that those characteristics that he has should be found in others that also have evil tendencies, right? Well, let's look at Harry. Harry, he had a lot of resiliency because Voldemort tried to kill him when he was a baby. He had to live in a broom closet, basically, with his cousin and his aunt and uncle tormenting him the whole time. He had to be forced with being bullied, and kind of nobody wanted to be his friend because of Dudley during his school years, until he got into Hogwarts. In Hogwarts, almost every single year, there was something out to get him. And then he also had to deal with Malfoy, and then he had to... So he's very resilient. He was very patient, because how many times did he have to make plans, let's say, on... what do you call it? Goblet of Fire. When he was preparing for the different tasks, he would practice with Hermione different spells, different charms, in order to be prepared ahead of time. We didn't see that in the movie, but we did see it in the books. So that's kind of having patience. How about cunning? Well, what was it that Harry was known for? Improvising with situations. Let's go back to Half-Blood Prince, which was the 6th movie in the 6th book. When Ron was poisoned, he all of a sudden thought of the Bezoar. And the Bezoar is one of the things that can, most of the time, for most poisons, act as an antidote for. So that is also worth mentioning. I mean, those are the same characteristics, and Dumbledore does mention this at some point, saying that between Voldemort and him, that means between Voldemort and Harry Potter, there are a lot of overlapping qualities between them. So it's not like they're that much more different from each other. So, back to our original question, is Voldemort evil? I don't think that Voldemort is necessarily evil. If we look at nature versus nurture, the current train of thought is that you are born with certain tendencies, certain qualities. However, the way that they are manifested are kind of reliant on the environment. So, what does this mean? If we use, for example, and this one is kind of hard to analyze because when we're talking about serial killers aren't usually very open, or everything they do is kind of gearing towards a reaction. And even when they're caught alive, and that is if they're caught alive. If they're not, then there's not that much more that you can interrogate and kind of analyze from a serial killer without putting anybody else at risk. So, if we look at one particular case, one who was known as the Iceman. Now, I believe he died in 2006, maybe. But the thing is that one of the things that he was known for is for being very cold. I mean, very expressionless, no remorse. It was almost like he didn't have any fear. One of the stories from his childhood was that there was his father was abusive towards him. His mother allowed the abuse, so it also wasn't that helpful. But when he was a child and he was smaller and kind of skinnier and weaker, you could say, there was a bully. Well, what did he do? There came a point where he kind of led the bully towards like a side area, killed him, cut off his fingers, took some teeth, and took it as a trophy. And if we go back to one of his qualities, that he was fearless, that he didn't have like a filter, he was impulsive. So, and also that he was geared towards action. Notice how not necessarily saying violence, but geared toward action. Of course, he grew up in a very abusive environment. So let's change the environment. What if he had been grown in a good household? What would have happened? What job professions require you to be fearless, jump into action, and really, what jobs would require that? How about law enforcement? Because if you need to protect the people, you need to jump into the lines of fire. The military. How about firefighters, emergency responders, or first aid responders? Not just in the ambulances, but those that arrive at the, where there's, let's say, flooding or an earthquake or, some natural disaster. Like all these professions require you to not be as concerned for your own safety as much as going out and actually saving other people. So, if he had grown up differently, the Iceman would have had another nickname and he would have done good. At least that's kind of like the thoughts behind this, right? Because those are qualities that aren't necessarily good or evil. It's just how he was raised and in the environment. It geared him towards action, but in his case, that action equated to violence. Well, in this case, if we go back to Voldermort and the Umbridge and all that, well, Professor Umbridge, again, resilient, she was cunning. Even though she was in the ministry, she did bad things. I mean, how many times did she force Harry to carve on his hand, "I must not tell lies"? How many punishments did she not inflict on the students? Or how about Voldemort? He almost created a crisis in the wizarding world. Or how about Harry? Harry, through all this, he still managed to be a decent person. One who protected the weak and one who put himself to, like, he made things his problem to solve in order for there to not be a problem. Like, he took it on himself to defeat Voldemort. He took it on himself to solve the Chamber of Secrets. He took it on himself to figure out the secret behind, what happened in the third book with the whole Sirius Black and the werewolf situation. So, is Voldemort evil? Not necessarily. Would he have been different if he had grown in a different environment? Because remember, he grew up in an orphanage because his mother abandoned him, basically. She had given up on her life. She had given up on raising her son. And he had always struggled with wanting to figure out that, yes, he was special, that there was a reason why he was in the situation that he was in. So, is Voldemort evil? He became evil. Would anything have been different? Who knows? I would beg to differ that he isn't necessarily evil. That if there was a different circumstance, probably he would have been evil in a different sense. Not as Dark Wizard, but he could have probably done worse for the wizarding world as being more effective than Cornelius Fudge, for example, and brought down even further that divide between witches and wizards and the rest. So maybe it would have been a different story, and maybe everybody would have been worse off because of it. Well, we will never know. At least with this, with the story that we know, he's gone, and the world continues. We do not know how much worse off it would have been if Voldemort would have been in a better situation, had been willing to be in the ministry, and had really furthered the agenda of magic is might. But anyway, I'll leave it to you. Any thoughts, comments, right down below. And again, I'll be linking this video from the SuperCarlinBrothers. I do strongly recommend watching them. And that's it. That's all I have to say. All right. Take care. Stay healthy. And remember, be kind to those around you, because you never know, and you really don't know what they're going through. See you later.